There are creatures science refuses to recognize, but new technology makes us question what is real. If our eyes see it, if our cameras capture it, does it exist? Enter a realm where fact meets fiction, science meets legend, where nightmares come to life. Do you believe?
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Scary Stories We Tell. I am your host, Chris Dashu, and I am joined once again by my good friend... Just wait. We'll just let you wait for a minute. My good friend, the owner, operator, and proprietor of the Dolan Museum, cataloging all things Dolan through the years. Maggie the Odd.
Hey, gang.
Maggie, we're here to talk about lost tapes once again.
Hell yes.
Because that's what we do on this show.
It's the ride that never ends.
Yeah. Well, it does end technically because there is a third season that ends, but...
but doesn't it really?
Right. It never ends in our hearts. It's just...
The legacy goes on.
Yeah, exactly. And on this episode of Scary Stories We Tell, we're going to be talking a little bit... We're going to be talking about the 7th episode of the 2nd season of Animal Planet's Lost Tapes. That episode is titled, I think aptly titled, wouldn't you agree, Maggie?
The most accurate out of the titles, I must say.
Of all the titles, you could have named it. Yeah, we're going to be talking on this episode about the one, the only, the Jersey Devil of the Pine Barrens.
What?
So Maggie, yeah, right? What's funny is you say finally, but there have been few and far between in this show. They really haven't touched the big ones.
No, not really. That's why I always appreciate. I mean, we got like the Mothman. That was like the last big biggie. I mean,
and Chupacabra and Bigfoot were very like front loaded. That was like 1 and 2, and then Mothman was later in that season. But since Mothman, it's been kind of, I'm not going to say things that aren't as well known, but if you've listened to some of the episodes, you know that the things that we've talked about before are somewhat they're not necessarily the things that I think of when I think of cryptids. When I think of cryptids, Jersey Devil is top of the pile.
It's definitely up there. Oh, yeah. So, it's the cryptid weird cousin. It's the cool uncle of the cryptid family.
So, Maggie, tell me a little bit about your prior experience with one Jersey Devil.
Oh, well, I have not experienced said Devil of Jersey. I have not even set foot in Jersey, but...
That's fair.
This is another one that I would come across like with probably some of the more engaging stories about sightings and interactions with. Right. It's probably up there between like that and the Grinning Man from like when I was in high school, just going down rabbit holes of cryptids and spooky, scary stuff and ghost noises. So this is one that I've been aware of for a hot minute. And like I said, it has a lot of quite prolific in its sightings as far as like the stories go. So I was excited to see like what they would come up with this one, which it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it could have been a bit more. It's another one of those classic cases of this is a heavy hitter, but the story seems to be a little more diffused. So
for me, like you said, for me, the Jersey Devil is like one of the big ones. I mean, he's up, they, pronouns be damned, with the Jersey Devil.
Let's be sensitive about the Jersey Devil.
I don't, when I think of cryptids, the Jersey Devil is part of that conversation almost always. And again, I think it stems from a lot of things. We talked a little bit about it at the end of the last episode, which was the X-Files connection, because they do have an episode of that show very early on in the run of the show, actually, that talks... Yeah, and I think the time and the place that episode takes place in the show kind of informs how bad that episode is, because that episode is probably one of the worst episodes of the show. But again, we did kind of have this conversation last time about how it would seem almost every cryptid on the show is really bad.
Yeah, it's almost they either play it up kind of hammy or
it's not what it intends to be at all. Like the Chupacabra is something different. The Jersey Devil in the X-Files episode, and again, this is the 5th episode of the 1st season of the show. I want to say the Jersey Devil in that episode is a Neanderthal
or something. It's like a caveman.
Yeah, it's a caveman of some sort, and they just like disappear at the end.
It didn't quite follow the lore of the Jersey Devil, which I'm glad that like Lost Tapes actually delved into a significant portion of how that came to be, where it was the 13th child and the mom was like, fuck it, the devil with it, and it turned out to be a devil. And I always like that backstory. It's so goobery that it's like, all right, yeah, we'll go with that. And they actually got an interview with one of the descendants, which I thought was really funny.
I know, I agree. You know, the story of the Jersey Devil as it's presented most places. In this episode, like Maggie mentioned, they do hew closer to our general the general interpretation of the Jersey Devil. But the way the story is told in 1735, Jane Leeds, also known as Mother Leeds, is a woman who had up until that point 12 children, and she finds out that she is pregnant with a 13th child. That's right, 13 children, unlucky number 13. And in 1735, Mother Leeds went into labor, and she denounced the child as the child would be the devil when the child was born. And like Maggie mentioned, boy, wasn't that child the devil, because when that child was born, they turned into a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. And yes, that is
dragon-like.
Yep. And the pictures, especially the Philadelphia Bulletin picture from January of 1909, that picture I think is the one that's seared into my memory, which does make it look like an American dragon. I do think that it's very, I mean, the wings and the head make it very dragon-esque, including the forked tail.
It always reminded me of like medieval art. It's one of those weird, obscure creatures where they're trying to describe something that somebody else saw, and it's just like, yeah, sure, we'll go with that.
Right. But so the Leeds family story kind of becomes this story through which the Jersey Devil is always told through this lens of a woman with a 13th child. Again, this child is born. And the other part of the story that I really enjoy, and they talk about it in the episode, is the baby is born, and then they open the thing, and it's like, oh my God, look at its eyes.
Right.
And it, flies up out the chimney. That is like the greatest part of the story is this baby flies out through the chimney, this devil baby, to go and I guess grow up to be what again we know now as the Jersey Devil. Now again, the Jersey Devil, we should mention the Jersey Devil is tied to a location in the United States.
Yes.
Almost directly tied to the lovely Pine Barrens of New Jersey, which is a place where lots of dead bodies of mobsters and people that they didn't like reside, because the Pine Barrens is a gigantic pine forest, simply known as Pines of the Pinelands in New Jersey.
Yep.
And it spans 7 counties in New Jersey. I actually, friend of the podcast, frequent guest of the show, Emma, actually lives up in the Northeast near the Pine Barrens. No, she has not seen the Jersey Devil. I have asked her. And I was disappointed because I just assumed if you live in Jersey, you must see it's like required.
Yeah, it's you're not a true Jersey person until you've seen that son again.
Hi. I'm Jersey Devil. I'm Mr. Devil. Welcome to the neighborhood. If you hear me on your roof at night, just know that it's me.
And I will kill you.
Yeah. But so the Leeds Devil and the Mrs. Leeds or Mother Leeds ends up becoming this giant story. Leeds Point is supposedly, again, a lot of this is apocryphal, a lot of this is folklore. It comes from the beliefs of the people at the time and kind of, I don't know, for me,
they were doing witch trials back then, so
right. And again, there also is, for me, when I think of this story of Mother Leeds, sometimes she's a witch, sometimes she's not, but I think that, like you just mentioned, when we're talking about America circa the 1700s, a lot of the things that we take for granted now that we understand explanations for, obviously they didn't understand then. And when you don't understand how things happen or why things happen, or if you're misidentifying animals late at night, your brain tends to go to the fantastical more than it does to the grounded in reality, as it were.
That's the beauty of it.
Right. And again, we'll talk about what the Jersey Devil may be, because I think as you would probably agree, there's probably one thing that more than likely it is, if it doesn't exist as the creature of legend. There's one other animal that I think you and I might be able to make a case for, and we'll get to it when we get to it. But the episode, Meg.
Yes.
Pretty dumb.
Yeah. I mean,
when the guy got, so the setup is, it's a family at the beach at Atlantic City, and they go on a shortcut that they'll never forget.
Classic.
Hey, that's the thing about this show in this season. Definitely, as we approach the end of this season, the show is definitely leaning into tropes that we've seen in horror before.
Oh, sure.
Family lost in the middle of nowhere, even with the dog that runs off, like that.
Oh, yeah. The dog that runs off, the dad that goes MIA. And right. So it's just,
the hat with blood on it, the fake outs. Like again, the show, I think in the first season, again, you kind of came in about halfway through the first season, but the first half of the season, first season wasn't much different, but for me, the first season was a little bit more experimental in its tone. It didn't
absolutely, yeah.
It didn't hew as close to horror as this does, and I've watched ahead, and boy, when we get to the third season, this is a completely different show. I'm not even exaggerating. This show becomes something completely different from what we're watching now in a lot of ways, which isn't a bad thing. But it's very... No,
I was about to say, I'm intrigued. I'm still on board. But...
It's very different. But again, this show, and again, we kind of talked about this season being a little nastier. It feels more like they're getting their bearings as to how to use the creatures in an interesting way.
Right.
I don't know. Me personally, I think that this episode succeeds more than it fails, but I don't know, like for me, those tropes are so tired.
Yeah, it was a serviceable episode. It was one of those where I wasn't like, what the fuck are they even doing? It was all right. Like the acting was fine. The tropes are the tropes. That's what it is. And it's one of those where I try and just ask myself, okay, so what would you do to improve this? And it's like, the Jersey Devil is a hard one to place. It truly is. It would be a Lost in the Forest type scenario. Or
it almost has to be, right?
Right. Or it'll be something weirder like the home surveillance trope that we've already seen in a few episodes here too. And that one isn't nearly as successful, I think, than the in the forest tropes that they lean into here. So it was one of those where it wasn't like a dazzling example of what you can do with this creature to make it eerie, but it's also one of those ambiguous concepts where unless you did a period piece, it's going to be a little tricksy to make it as engaging.
Well, and that's the thing. I personally would contend that the more interesting episode here would have been to do another period piece. Because
yeah, it's just tough with the, needing that lost tape period thing. But I know as far as like just running around in an abandoned house in the woods, it's kind of bleh.
Well, and that's the thing, like you mentioned with that Mothman episode, if you go back and listen to that one, which you totally should.
You should do it.
there is that kind of issue that we ran into, which was the premise of the show is limiting at its core. There has to be some kind of recorded footage gimmick. And yeah, I mean, if we're talking 1735, we're
too late.
120 years before moving picture gets invented with Edison, I think, right? I mean, it's like late 1800s.
I mean, I guess if you wanted to go with that, it could be one of those things where like maybe a portrait of like the family house or something, which would have been a popular memento for like photograph, maybe cut the Jersey Devil. And so it was a lineage, like finding the Jersey Devil thing. But
interesting.
And that's just kind of off the top of my head because, like I said, I'm really stumped on this one. It's either a creature hunting situation or accidentally caught it while we were out in the woods type of thing.
Right.
So,
and that's the problem. I think that is like the massive issue with this episode is because, like you said, because you can't go, well, it's the 1900s, early 1900s. They could have, they didn't, and they did it for the Mothman, and the success of that is kind of, again, your mileage is going to vary. I
still say that one is at least memorable, and I appreciate that it was enough of a stretch. It still made sense.
Oh, I agree. They did something much. Yeah, they did something. They did something different. That's for sure. Because this really does feel. I think that's the issue. I think that I keep having with this show is you have these creatures with these really exciting backstories, and they're really interesting and unique, and each one kind of has something different to offer. And then it's just another family in the woods. It's no different than Chupacabra, frankly. I mean, the only thing that kind of differentiates it from, say, the Chupacabra episode is the family essentially in this episode survived. The dog dies, but the family survives, which...
Yeah, sorry, Puppo.
I thought they were gonna. I thought they were gonna do something with the wife being pregnant.
Right, because that would have been like if it were kind of leaning toward Rosemary's Baby scenario, where maybe it's a second coming of the Jersey Devil, or maybe it's more of a land curse. Ooh, I like the land curse. That's nice.
You see what I mean? Like they're there, and because they're there,
an odd detail to have and not really do too much with, other than, well, it was probably after him because it was another kid. It's like, no. Because oddly enough, that is one of my favorite horror movie scenarios is the evil baby scenario. Like It's Alive is still one of my favorites. Brood, fantastic. Like
to me, that is the big missed opportunity here because you have the setup. I mean, you've set up that this family is trying to get back from vacation, but they're also, the wife is pregnant, and you tell this story about Mother Leeds and the baby and the Jersey Devil. It's like, well, if you're gonna tell that part of the story, which again, they didn't have to do any of the Mother Leeds stuff. They didn't have to.
Right.
They could have just talked about the sightings of the Jersey Devil since then, which again, they've done that too. We've seen in this show, they have ignored the pre-existing source material and firsthand accounts and kind of the generally accepted mythology for the creature. They have thrown that out so many times that they could have thrown it out here. And I would have been like, I totally get it, because that's kind of the MO of this show's creators.
Yeah.
But instead they go, well, we're going to tell you the story that everybody who knows about the Jersey Devil has heard, which is the Mother Leeds, and then it's just a family in the woods. And it's like, it's not much. It's just the Jersey Devil is an interesting design, but I think even can we talk about the design? I think the design is interesting for what it is, but it's not the Jersey Devil.
No, it's not what I would anticipate it. That's for sure. But hey, it's
a goat man. Like that's what it is.
Yeah, that's kind of what they're leading with.
It's a guy in a goat suit, like just straight up. It's a dude probably about 6'1", 6'2", in a full body goat suit, and you see it a couple times. So, I mean, unlike a lot of the episodes of this show where we're not seeing anything, you see several shots of this thing backlit. You see it lit from behind, and it's a pretty intimidating looking thing. But again, not the Jersey Devil. But that's that's quite okay. That is okay in my approximation, because again, the show tends to do its own thing.
Yeah. Well, and the accounts back in the day, it wouldn't have been accurate to really get a handle. Like I said, it plays up like, fucking Victorian sketches of rhinos and shit like that, where it's like, no, we don't really know how to describe this thing.
Right.
So this is what it looks like. Because it always looked like a hammerhead bat on like a weird goat body.
I'm with you. It's a very distinct creature.
Yeah. So it's one of those
it has a horse face.
Yeah. It's a lot longer and shit like that. Well, at least according to like the illustrations and blah, blah, blah. But still, if there's enough sightings, it would have been interesting to push it just a little bit more. But I also understand monetary restraints and shit like that, especially for costuming.
Sure.
I get that.
It's easier to just go and buy a goat costume. I get it.
But on the other foot, with like the whole leaks thing, I wonder if they stuck with the traditional folklore one strictly because they managed to get an interview with one of like the lineage for the leads. So, because more often than not, they would have gone the more scientific route and tried to go through a lot more different animals that it could potentially be. This one was another episode where they stuck with the folklore and interviews as opposed to going with the more animal creature route where it's like, okay, well, it could be this, and wow, check out, this could be, and blah, blah, blah. it seems like one of those where they leaned more into their narrative as opposed to the science behind it, which it's interesting to see what calls they make for which creatures. This one, I would not have anticipated them just sticking as hard to the folklore as they did. I was expecting a bit more wishy-washy animal facts throughout.
Well, and that, Maggie, expert segue, that brings me to, well, you did it already. That brings us to what could the Jersey Devil be? And I think on the count of three, we could both say exactly what it more than likely is. It's a fucking owl, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. If it isn't an owl, what is it?
If it isn't an owl, right. And again,
everything back then was a stinking owl.
Well, and so that's the thing. And, we didn't talk about it on the Mothman episode too much. But I think we have the opportunity now to kind of address it. They keep talking about creatures with big red eyes that are flying through the air late at night, that maybe even swoop near the heads of people.
Yeah, just gang. Owls are big as fuck. They got weird ass eyes. They're spooky.
And they do tend to, intentionally or unintentionally, attack people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because they're very territorial.
Right. And I mean, there's just a slew of shit that they could have done on owls alone because, between native folklore, as far as them being terrible spirits, Strix are fucking frightening. It's I can totally believe that the grand majority of cryptids from 1700s or way back in the day where you can't accurately portray what you saw, totes would probably be that. They're huge. If you haven't seen one in person, it's quite intimidating.
Well, the other thing is, I'm pretty sure great horned owls have a wingspan of 14 or 15 feet. It's not, again, like you said, when things are on the ground, it's easier to tell their size than when they're flying around in the air.
Damn straight.
Because again, almost hitting that elk, people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize it was the size of a moose. And it's yeah, it's huge. It's gigantic. If we hit it, we would die. And I contend, again, I'm a skeptic, but I do want to believe, like yourself, like Jess, like Emma, we're all in the camp of we want to believe. We're strong skeptics, but we do have a skeptical mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, with things like the Jersey Devil, I want to believe so badly, as I'm sure you do, that there is this giant horse-headed creature flying around New Jersey, because that sounds awesome.
That'd be a hell of a thing to see, that's for sure. But also,
it's owls exist in reality, and that's a hard thing to kind of balance the one with the other. I know owls exist. Owls are fucking scary. They're big. They're not aggressive, but they are territorial.
Well, and if they mistake you for food, it's just like freaking sharks. They're
it's not intentional.
They mistake you.
Right.
It doesn't make them any less scary, but it's still an element to keep in mind.
Right. And again, that's the other thing that I think it's hard to, when you have a conversation about cryptids, there is a thing about it that I think people tend to overlook and forget. In a lot of these stories, these creatures don't have, they don't really have agency of their own. It's like they know what they're doing and they know that they're antagonizing people. And I think for me, I've always thought about these creatures as animals. They're a wild animal like anything else that lives in the wild.
Or they have their own agenda going on. It's just like deep sea creatures that we don't really understand their mannerisms because we haven't seen them as often as other creatures.
Right.
We can only guess. So it's
Yeah. And that's where I come down in all of this is my thinking is these creatures would only be attacking people if the people presented themselves as a threat to these creatures. I don't think that the Jersey Devil would just attack people wandering around.
Right. Unless it was an evil kid, which would have some sentience, but also it wouldn't be around this long.
Right.
So it would have to be like a larger encounter with somebody that could continue the lineage of the Jersey Devil also, especially for all the recent sightings. So
and that's the other
those where it would have to be a creature because how else? It's just like Spring-Heeled Jack is one of my favorite legends, and that was just one quick spat. It had a couple of sightings, and then he was gone. And it's like, that makes sense. That was a weird thing that happened back then.
Yeah,
with stuff like, the Jersey it's the same Jersey Devil that makes it. I mean, on Mothman status, I guess, where it's just like a creature that lives forever. But if it follows the folklore and came from an actual human mom, it's like. It would not last that long. in the woods alone.
Well, and to your point, that's what they kind of address in that X-Files episode.
Right.
Like, how does this, again, like you said, how do you say, well, this thing was born in 1735, but people are seeing it as recently as 1909?
Yeah, it needs that's a long time to bridge that gap there.
There's no immortality in this creature's milieu. There's never anyone who says like, well, it's invincible and it can never die. It's like, no. Nobody says
no.
That's not part of this.
Right.
And that I think is the issue that I really have with these kinds of stories, is the thing that you said, which is with Bigfoot, I imagine, as I would assume you do, there are many of them. They live together in small pods. And and
it's all across the country too. So that also makes sense. They have like a migratory system, or it just spread. Who the hell knows? But that makes sense to me, that there's pockets. Many big feet.
Right. Jersey Devil is in the Pine Barren. Hard stop. That's it. That's where the Jersey Devil is.
Done.
It's like you said, it's like the Mothman. But the thing about the Jersey Devil that the Mothman has, our good friend Richard would attest to this, the Mothman has some stuff behind him, like the Indrid Cold stuff. Like all of the stuff with the aliens and the point, and again, the stuff with Point Pleasant and the bridge collapsing is a part of the Mothman story that a lot of these other stories don't have, which is the premonition part, the premonitory aspect of, well, he saw, he's a harbinger of bad things to come. The Jersey Devil is, from all of my research, just a creature that lives in the Pine Barrens. And
Yep. That's pretty much my experience in the readings.
What does the Jersey Devil do?
What do you do?
How many of them are there? Again, like you said, I mean, if we're being led to believe there's only one, this thing is fucking 300 years old.
Ancient. So yeah, we probably haven't seen it recently because it's dead. Finally shriveled up like a Skeksis, a dark crystal.
Yeah, and we would never find the skeleton. I really hate that argument of like, well, if there are Bigfoots, how come we never find a body? People disappear. Real human beings just disappear off the face of the planet.
There's animals that eat carcasses. Forests are quite efficient with getting rid of shit. That's why so much shit just disappears there.
Go ask James Renner about Amy Mahalovic or any of the disappeared people who disappeared in our country.
Yeah.
In a fucking American city.
Just read through the missing 411s, man. It's an extensive list of uncanny disappearances.
If you want to shit yourself and not get a good night's sleep and never go to our national parks. Richard, again, mentioning Richard has the missing 411 books on his bookshelf and he's never read them because the stories are just that horrifying. And
I mean, true, but
they that's the thing for me as someone who has watched the documentaries and done a fair amount of research on missing 411.
Oh yeah,
it is scary because people
some
just
of them are just outstandingly preposterous in some of the scenarios, especially the ones where they come back. The missing ones that are still missing, those make sense to me. It's the ones where they come back that it gets really fucking weird.
Where they're like, I was somewhere, I couldn't understand where I was, and then all of a sudden I wasn't there anymore. Like, what is happening here?
Right. Folks? Or the kid that had the dry shoes, but he was found like miles away on like an island where you had to swim to get to it. Like wild shit. And sure, I'm sure there is an explanation, but it's the staggering amount.
Are you sure? How sure are you?
Decently. It's just one of those things where like if you're not, it's not like there's cameras in the woods everywhere. It's not that type of security. It's just, and that's why I think these folklore creatures are so fascinating in that time bubble where it's like, of course people would be mistaking like deers, owls and shit because it's like there wasn't lighting. It's not like there was a vast amount of technology to like back any of this. It's just hearsay. It is just the remnants of facts that you have where it's like, oh yeah, Leeds had a 13th kid, didn't turn out right, and it could have been fucking anything, but rumor goes around and it's spreads because everybody loves a sensationalized story, especially back then.
And that is kind of where I come down on this. Is I think there may have been something that happened to the Leeds family. There may have, there is a family whose name is Leeds. I think that but again, it's like saying somebody named Jesus existed. Like, yeah, no fucking shit. Let's hedge, real bet hedging here, dude. Like, yeah, somebody named Jesus. It's like saying somebody named Maggie existed. Like, yeah,
like,
you're right.
Kidding. That and several cats named Maggie too. I'm aware.
So I think for me, my kind of take on the Jersey Devil is there is some sort of folklore component that I think comes from, like you said, maybe some sort of gossip at the time, or just who knows about the Leeds family. Because again, Mother Leeds was also believed to be a witch. So if you believe someone's a witch and they have a baby and it's a miscarriage, maybe
I was about to say a lot of bad shit can happen, especially in that era with kids.
Oh my God.
And it's like a lot that isn't explained too. It's the lack of information that makes this stuff spooky. That's why like a modern day's like creepy folklore is kind of hard to come by.
Right. Yeah, because again, we live, as much as people always say, like, we live in unprecedented times, we also live in really boring times.
Yeah.
Because the advent of science and technology has demystified a lot of things.
A little bit. We're now reliant on and at the mercy of coincidence to be the main propeller of that stuff. So
exactly. Everybody just goes, well, it could be this, but more than likely it's this. And it's like, well, in this day and age, most of the time we can even go as far as to say it's more than likely just this. Yes. And that's why, like we said, with the Jersey Devil, I would love to believe that a Jersey Devil exists, that there is a giant winged goat. Ted even. But overwhelmingly, I would think that this is just an owl. It's not even an owl. It's a misidentification of some
of sorts. Yeah, especially for the flying thing. Come on now.
The time and the place and what it is. Again, for me, I don't know. Again, you and I have been doing this now for a long time, almost a year now.
Right.
The water creatures and the air creatures, I think, have been this show's real failing. They have been
sucks because there is distinct potential. Honestly, a couple of the flying ones, I will give them credit for at least creativity because some of them can be pretty good. Like a bunch of the flying ones stick out in my head, like the fucking owl pellet, the Monan,
the death raptor. That was probably the best one.
The giant eagle where it fucking killed a kid. Had a dead kid on a skateboard there.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I don't think any of those kids died though. I think that was the issue with that. They like the kid had his like arm, but it has like his arm broken. Remember? Right. He was dropped by the Thunderbird.
That was
thank you. So fucking. That was the most tenuous of the flying creatures.
Oh my gosh, I know. But yet, I still think about it every now and then, and I go, huh. But yeah, the sea critters. That's another one where it's just kind of a little bit of a falter. But it's just so strange. It's so strange, the decisions, and you can tell that it's different writing teams working on this, and that's totally fine. But this was another encounter of popular creature that it's just really hard to execute on modern times. It's like whenever they do a sequel in the cityscape, and it's like, please don't put the leprechaun in an urban landscape. Please
don't. I don't know. Leprechaun in the Hood is not bad.
If you say so.
Oh, what's the fucking line in that movie? Something I came for my loot, not to play with the fruit or some shit. It's like,
gosh, there's just so many bangers in that one, especially the rap.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Oh, Lep in the Hood.
Lep in the Hood.
If that doesn't age your movie significantly, that doesn't.
Where's Jersey Devil in the Hood?
Yeah, there's your approach right there.
But I will say, as a shout out to a good friend of mine who him and I have always joked about starting a cryptid rap super group. One of the better names that we came up with was because of the Jersey Devils, DJ Jersey D, which is pretty great. Yeah, not as good as just one of us being known as the Ohio Grassman, which just happens to work either way without any alteration. It's me, the Ohio Grassman.
Don't even have to explain it. It's just there in the name, point blank. Oh, please make this happen.
DJ Jersey D and Lil Choop. That's the Chupacabra's Lil Choop. So,
oh my God, Choopaloop.
Choopaloop. So, I think, though, that's where I come down on the Jersey Devil is would like to believe it, but I think more or less it's just an owl. What about you, Maggie? What do you think?
I mean, as I have previously stated, it's in the same mental category as Spring-Heeled Jack. If it existed, I think it was during its time, but I agree. It's probably just something that was either a nasty rumor about a lady that had a bad birth thing going for her,
which is not surprising at the time.
No, once again, they were still doing witch trials and shit, so it's like she birthed a devil. Now or it's haunting these woods.
Yeah, or maybe it was just a miscarriage, or maybe it was stillborn. Who knows? Again, when you view things through a certain lens, it demystifies them, but at the same time, it's also just like, man, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, I appreciate the folklore behind it. I love a good tale, and Jersey Devil is still one of my faves. I do like it.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like we've said, we live in unprecedented times, but we do live in somewhat boring times because we are able to just be like, well,
right. Aside for some of the stray, like internet haunted paintings type of things, or last post curses, I think. Oh, Dybbuk box. That's probably one of the more recent ones that has happened that was just unprecedented bad luck afterwards.
Until it was essentially deemed, unfortunately.
I know, but wasn't that a fun time? We all believed.
Here is the thing, though, about something like the Dybbuk box. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people that genuinely believes by believing in something having power, you imbue it with the power, even if it didn't have the power to begin with.
Yeah, well, and that's the power of coincidence. And that's why I said it's the main component for driving some of this like crazy ass rumors, even when it's explained.
Yeah.
You can divide the audience just by being like, well, it could have been. You can't say for everything, and it's like, yeah, but okay.
If I say it for 9 out of the 10 things, that one thing being weird is just one aberrant thing.
Yeah, that's just
weird.
one.
Yeah, it's if all the other things point to it possibly more or less just being an owl, it's probably just an owl.
Bingo.
So on the next episode of Lost Tapes.
Oh, buddy.
Oh, my God.
I
don't want to bury the lead here on this episode because that's not what we're about at the Scary Stories We Tell headquarters, but yikes is all I can say. If you want to hear us more than likely clown on an episode for like 30 minutes, check in for the next one because it's about an alien, and we'll just leave.
Yeah, an alien. There you go.
We'll leave it at that.
Next time on Quantum Leap.
Next time on Running Out of Ideas, the TV show.
Boy.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about that episode, which does feature an alien, but not the alien type you might think. Don't look it up if you don't know what we're talking about, but join us. Until then, Maggie, where can people find you?
You can check out my wares at dolanmuseum.com. It's a bunch of goofy comics, illustrations, and whatever the hell I've been working on in my madness. And also Instagram at Maggie the Odd, and I guess TikTok Dolan the Odd. Why the hell not?
Maggie's TikTok content's on point.
Oh, I thank you.
I like your TikTok content every time I see it.
Yeah, it's whatever ADD propelled nonsense is going on. I want to
Did you just describe TikTok in general? I think.
Okay, well, yes, and that's why I enjoy it.
I showed my mom TikTok for the first time, and she's like, "What is this? What are?"
It's overwhelming at first. You have to get accustomed to it.
Yeah, people just like make things and post it. And she's like, "Who is this person?" I was like, "Somebody on the internet."
Yeah, some random person.
Someone whose face I will see once and may never see again for the rest of my life. Isn't that weird?
Until you like one of their videos, then you're seeing their face like every other video.
And then you become invested in them as human beings, and then you become a TikTok influencer, and then you're our good friend Josh Bragg of the Haunting Season, where you do TikTok professionally. So hey, sky's the limit if you're a content creator.
It's nuts.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? If you think you can make something entertaining, go and do it, because
it's for fun, gang.
And it's also TikTok. You have a cell phone. Yeah. We all have cell phones. Make some dumb TikTok content. See where it takes you.
Find the Jersey Devil. Throw that shit on TikTok.
I make audio content for a living. I don't want to be in front of the camera, but there are plenty of people who would love nothing more than to stand in front of a camera and talk about God knows what. So if that's you, go make TikTok content. But Maggie's TikTok content's pretty great.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't make TikTok videos. I have 2, and they're set to private, and there you go.
Hey, to each their own.
Exactly. I can watch them and laugh, but nobody else can. So there you go. An audience of one. So as for me, you can find me on the internet at cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree. Go there. As for this show, Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge do the artwork for the show. So Maggie's here. So thank you, Maggie, as always, for providing the base from which this show launched, which is awesome album artwork.
Woo!
Look at that. Compliments boost that ego.
Wow. And I went from a negative to maybe a 0.
Yeah, there you go. Wow.
Oh, I'm joking. Chill.
Whoa. I tried, folks. As always, Alex Malnick of Blondo provides the music. You can find him on Spotify. Just search Blondo. And we'll let our good friend, the host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.